You already know what it is. It's your boy Laid Back with another reaction, another review, another episode. Hey, Diddy, you up to bat. Pause. Bah. It's your boy Laid Back. Welcome back to my channel. Hey, two things we got to do. You got to hit that subscribe button. I'm drinking this water. You already know what it is, man. You are the prize in 2025. You are the prize in 2025. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the notification bell. Stay up to date with all the videos. We back with another one. Like I said, I'm trying to cover this to the best of my ability. It's a lot going on. We got P. Diddy stripper describes intimate details of freak-offs. This is gonna be this whole thing is just crazy. Look, hit that like button, share this with the last person you text in your phone, and let's go ahead and get into it. Fire Squad, what's popping? Let's get it.
The questioning of this alleged sex worker, this male performer, Sheree Hayes, the Punisher, has continued by the prosecution.
The Punisher? Come on, man. You got a nickname like the Punisher. All right, let's stay on topic, bro.
I asked him, how are these sessions scheduled? Hayes responds, I'd be reached out to at 5 or 7 p.m. for later. They'd ask for a sexy scene, but I knew it would be more. How would it start? Hayes responds, baby oil, a sexy atmosphere, Mr. Combs would direct. Why is this important? Well,
again, if Combs is the one who's conducting, if he's the one who's directing, that goes right to the racketeering charges. It puts him right in the middle of all of it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's very consistent with what the physical evidence is, consistent with the testimonial evidence. I think the jury's in a position where they're going to have to, where they might actually say, okay, we're confident about certain things, right? We're confident, right, Serena, we're confident that he abused Cassandra Ventura, that he physically abused her. The testimony, the video, the pictures, corroborating testimony. I think they also had freak-offs. There's no denying about it. It's just, what does that amount to? Does that amount to racketeering or trafficking? Those are the questions. So here's another important question. We got it from Mikey John. This is for you, Serena. Whatever Cassie's role was of either victim or co-conspirator, do you think there's enough evidence to convict him even without her? That's an interesting question. So if the jury says we're awash with her, we don't know what to believe, what not to believe. Everything else, well, can they convict him still of racketeering? Can they convict him still of trafficking of victim one, meaning Cassandra Ventura? What do you think?
I think without her testimony, it would be very difficult. You need somebody who was victimized in this situation, that being Cassie. We'll see who else comes forward. But I don't think a jury can find beyond a reasonable doubt that certain elements of these crimes were committed without having an actual victim that they believe was victimized.
Will, how does the defense, this is my question, how does the defense properly defend against transportation to engage in prostitution? There are two charges there with respect to two alleged victims. So basically, it's that Combs would have transported sex workers and alleged victims with the intent for prostitution. There's not threats needed, there's not force needed, there's not coercion needed. You know, she had testified that these people were paid, that she had freak-offs in different locations, that there was at least one worker who was used in multiple cities. How does the defense defend against this?
That he isn't the one who transported her, that he had nothing to do with who came to the freak-offs. We know the freak-offs occurred. We know, I mean, the defense said in the very, very beginning, Attorney Garagos in her fantastic opening statement, that the case is about voluntarily adult choices made by capable adults in a consensual relationship. So essentially what the defense to that would have to be is that he wasn't involved in procuring anyone. He came into these situations as they were, and as he texted back and forth with Cassie, he loved being in these situations, but he had nothing to do with bringing folks from point A to point B and didn't know who was going to be there at all. He also had nothing to do with paying them in any way, shape, or form. That's the defense.
So we go back to, well, the defense also said, I think in their opening statement, hey, he paid them for their time and experience, not for sex work. Maybe, you know, he enjoyed the stories that they had to tell. All right, so anyway, continuing on with live updates from court. the continuation of the questioning of the Punisher, Sheree Hayes, one of these alleged sex workers.
Punisher is crazy.
Prosecutor asks, how did the direction work? And he responds, Mr. Combs might say, sit forward, move the camera, or what would happen sexually. You know, one time during sex, he dropped a stack of money. He said, I like this S. Okay. Then there's this one. How much baby oil did you use? And Hayes said, a lot. We were supposed to be glistening as much as possible. How long would they last? 4 hours. A lot of waiting, maybe 40 minutes or so. I was supposed to finish in a... Sorry, this is graphic. He was supposed to... I'm gonna leave that part out. Just let's say that they completed in a very specific way. So reading that in real time, apologies. Okay, so Serena, as we're reading this, you have to wonder if it is quite intense and it is prolonged. And, you know, Cassandra Ventura testified last week about being urinated on, yet there was testimony from somebody who said she instructed the worker to do that.
Wow.
But you have to wonder, the more elaborate these are, does the jury say, how on earth was she able to actually consent to this? Did she really consent to this? And it goes to the psychological defense. That while on paper it might have looked like she consented, are there coping strategies at play? Are there traumatic issues at play? I think the more the prosecution establishes how strange and elaborate and intense these sessions were, it does beg the question, was it really consensual?
Right. And when you're prosecuting a case, you can provide as much information, evidence, and facts to a jury as you possibly can. But at the end of the day, when they stand up and go back to that deliberation room, it's up to them to think about all of it and to use their common sense and make reasonable inferences from the evidence. You can't put everything into their minds. You can only kind of influence them as best you can with the evidence that you have, and then ask them not to leave their common sense at the door. Go back there. And what do you think this 19-year-old girl was thinking during this, during these freak offs by this very powerful man? They have to a little bit substitute their own position and try to think about what reasonable conclusions they could make. So I agree, Jesse. I think giving them all of this information is so important so that they could dissect it later and recognize, hey, maybe it looked consensual, but nobody would have consented to that.
Serena, I'm going to give you another question because this is a question from abroad by Sarah Senna, and it's just so similar to your name. I said, why don't you get this question? Will the defense bring any witnesses to the stand at all, or only the prosecution?
An excellent question. And it goes back a little bit to whether P. Diddy himself will testify. He obviously, as William said, has the right to make that decision all his own. So he could be somebody who takes the stand. We don't know. That being said, again, on these types of situations where you're saying it was consensual, someone's going to have to stand up for Diddy. Someone's going to have to get up there and say, I actually saw it happening this way. It wasn't what the prosecution said. Now, the defense could try to flip some of those prosecution witnesses to make those statements. And I guess what we like to say is turn that witness into their own witness and have them support the defense without the defense having to put their own witnesses on. But I think by the close of evidence of the prosecution's case, the defense will have to decide, were we able to damage the prosecution's witnesses enough? Were we able to flip enough witnesses to our side? Or do we have to put on our own case and put some of these people on that will help the consent argument?
Okay, so we have more questions coming in. We got a question from Michael Mendoza. How can the public see the court daily transcript? Well, I'll tell you what. Here at Law and Crime, we actually have the show Scandal with Sierra Gillespie. She's actually recounting much of the transcript from each day. We also, by the way, are kind of experimenting with AI, and we're doing recreations of key moments of this trial using the full transcript. So everybody check out Law and Crime's YouTube as we try to give you an in-depth analysis of the transcript. Okay, question from... Okay, this is interesting. Will, I'll go to you. So we had a question for the poll. We had a poll for all of our viewers. Do you think Diddy will take the stand? 62% say no, 37% say yes. Will, your reaction to that?
I mean, I think we want him to take the stand. I think we as observers, I think we as the public would love to hear what he has to say.
Right.
From a legal standpoint, though,
Hmm.
my advice to him would be to not testify.
Yeah, I don't think, Serena, he took the stand in his trial 25 years ago regarding the nightclub shooting. It worked out well for him.
Ooh.
That's right, it did. He had a great defense attorney, Ben Brofman. Mark Agnifilo used to work with Ben Brofman, and so he's still kind of got that thread of great attorneys fighting for him. And yes, he did take the stand. I do think it was a very different situation back then. I think there's just so much evidence that he could be confronted with in this case that it would be a tragedy for him to take the stand here. I think with a gun case, you could make certain arguments that are compelling, and the follow-up is not going to be as damaging as it would here.
So we've been talking so much about how there's no cameras, there's no audio equipment. We got a question from Vanessa. Why do you think the press hasn't been able to capture the photos of Diddy? We've seen photos of Luigi Mangione, but why not Diddy? Well, first of all, Luigi Mangione, they've able to capture photos of him going into court, but I think they've also captured photos of him in state court. I can't confirm they've captured photos of him in federal court, which goes to a different question, Will, right? Why no photos? Why no cameras? Why no audio equipment in federal court? What's the deal?
It certainly is frustrating. It has been a longstanding practice in federal court, in all federal courts, not to have TV cameras in the courtroom. It's something that, candidly, I don't understand. I think in this day and age, it's something we expect. The United States Supreme Court is hearing arguments every day that matter to thousands, if not, to millions and millions of people. And I think it would be great if the public were able to observe those arguments take place, all the way filtering down to cases like this. I don't understand it, other than the fact that it's just simply been the longstanding tradition.
Got a question here from Nicole. I'll throw it to you, Serena. Look, I will say one of the big pieces of interest in this case is who else will be named, or what celebrities are attached. Same thing what we saw in Jeffrey Epstein, right? Which brings you to this question. This is a question from Nicole. For example, if other celebs are found as co-conspirators, would they also be tried? Or is this solely focusing on Diddy?
It's a great question. And this goes towards the idea of prosecutorial discretion. Sometimes there's an appetite by prosecutors to prosecute, and sometimes there's not. I think we can all think of instances in our lives where we know that something was wrong, we know somebody committed a crime, and yet they were not prosecuted. Sometimes the prosecution just wants to focus on the biggest fish of all, especially the feds. They like a good win. They do not like to lose. They do not like to risk that. And so if P. Diddy was the biggest fish of all, then they might just gather up all of the other people, flip them, give them proffer agreements, as we mentioned earlier, and get as much evidence as possible against the big fish. So depending on what they would uncover about those other celebrities, they may or may not have the appetite to prosecute them.
Yeah, and I never seemed clear to me that Combs was going to take a deal and flip and turn on people, because whatever deal he would have been offered, it would have been significant prison time, I think. And also, by the way, it seems to me the prosecution is very specific and narrow with this case, because if you were to go after Diddy, hypothetically, in a trial where every single allegation about him came to, you could bring up, right? He's facing how many lawsuits right now? The trial would take, 10 years? So they're very specific right now on what the charges are and who's a part of this. We have I just saw it right here. Where is it? Okay, we have an update from court. Will, would you like to have an evidentiary question? Would you help explain it to the audience? Sure. Okay. So this just happened in court. The prosecutor asked Sheree Harris, again, this apparent sex worker, then what? He responds, she would leave with Mr. Combs 10 or 15 minutes. She'd return in a bathrobe and pay me $2,000 or $1,200 cash. Prosecutor asks, did you think Miss Ventura was enjoying herself? And immediately an objection from Sean Combs' defense counsel. Now, I know why they're asking that, right? Because they would love for him to say she seemed like this was the last thing she wanted to do. She seemed like she was being forced into this. She hated it, right? Great for sex trafficking allegations, but objection, and the objection was sustained. Why was there an objection, and why was it sustained? Well,
there was an objection because, for the reasons you just said, the defense attorney certainly doesn't want to know the answer to that question, because what if the answer was no? It was obvious that she was in fear. It was obvious she didn't want to be there. It was obvious that this was the last thing in the world she wanted to do. It was sustained, I'm going to guess, because it probably called for hearsay. So unless there was something that the Punisher could testify to regarding how she conveyed that she was into it, which I don't think the judge knew the answer to, it wouldn't be allowed in. So anything that she would say to the Punisher during the course of the sexual encounter would be, I would consider it hearsay. It wouldn't be allowed in.
Good try, prosecution. Not today for the defense. It's interesting to see that back and forth. Okay, abroad from Sarah Senna says, oh, thank you so much for reading my question, Jesse. I'm so happy. You're welcome. Thanks so much for submitting the question. Question for you, Serena, from Beat. At what point do you think the prosecution is going to bring in mental health experts to explain why Cassie stayed? And let me just do a little self-promotion here. We did a whole sidebar episode on this, came out yesterday. Encourage everybody to check it out about the potential mental health defense. I was talking to Dr. Daniel Bober about it. Okay, but I throw to you, Serena. When do you think they're going to call mental health experts?
Well, I think they have to definitely call a mental health expert to explain things like a delayed outcry, the length of time it took for her to say something was going on, and also her state of mind that must have been during these acts, and why she might have acted in a way that seemingly incongruous to somebody who's not consenting to it. When is a great question. I think somebody like that, a mental health expert, is easier to kind of schedule, unless they're very busy, of course, but easier in the sense that they're not a witness. They're not somebody who's scared to testify. They're not 8 months pregnant. So somebody like that could be seen as almost like a filler, so that they can work around the schedules of the witnesses who are a little bit more difficult to schedule, and just put that person in there, whenever there's a blank spot. So I don't know when, but it's probably some time where is convenient for all.
I think it's key testimony. I think it's going to be imperative testimony to understand Cassandra Ventura's alleged statements, behavior, actions, which brings me, Serena, I'll throw one more question at you. This is from Leg 7K. It's the same thing. Will the psychologist take the stand and be cross-examined? Also, could it be possible more than one doctor on the stand? So we believe Dr. Dawn Hughes is going to testify for the prosecution. She had testified in the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial. She's not going to be able to testify about coercive control, but she'll be able to talk about coping strategies, why a victim stays with an abuser. Do you think so? So is she going to take the stand, and will she be cross-examined? And will there be more than one doctor?
Yes. So yes, I think that there will potentially be what's called a battle of the experts, right? You'll have two different doctors saying two different things. And I do for sure think she'll be cross-examined. They'll probably cross-examine her on the fact that she did not specifically analyze Cassie herself. These experts are able to testify about essentially ideas and studies and things that they've seen in their practice, but they don't specifically analyze or meet with the victim themselves. And so I would probably cross-examine her on that, the fact that she can't specifically opine as to what Cassie herself was actually thinking, because she never interviewed or analyzed Cassie herself. She wasn't there. She couldn't know. And then, of course, our favorite cross-examination questions, which are about financials, right? How much are you getting paid to be here? How much are you getting paid to say what you're saying? How much were you prepped by the prosecution, or on the other side by the defense? A jury definitely takes that into account. They don't love hired guns. And so it'll be interesting to see the battle of the experts when the doctors get up on the stand and see kind of who's credible and who's not.
I was on air the other day with Mark Garagos on News Nation, and I brought up Dr. Dawn.
Man, there's so many different layers when it comes to these prosecutions and cross-examinations. Like, you get on the stand and testify as a doctor, and then the cross-examination asks you, yo, how much you getting paid to be here? And you sitting there and how long was the preparation? Did they tell you to under oath?
Hughes' testimony, and he goes, wait a minute, wasn't she the one who testified for Amber Heard? Meaning, like, that didn't work out so well for her. I get it. Got an update from court. This is from the prosecutor. Again, questioning Sheree Hayes. Did you use drugs? Hayes responds, I'm not a marijuana smoker, but I did pull a Bill Clinton. I was handed a joint. Prosecutor asks, did you have performance issues? Hayes responds, having the woman's partner there, yes. The question then is, did the issues affect your pay? Objection. Will, what's that about?
Whoa.
I don't know. I think that. Well, I don't know.
I'll tell you what. We got another update from court. I'll give it to you. So the judge said overruled. Sheree Hayes says, I wasn't sure how they calculated it. One time, Mr. Combs threw condoms on the couch next to us. I struggled. It was a failure. Prosecutor says, what happened? Hayes says, they went out. He did something. She came back and thanked me for privacy. I don't know. What is this about? I'm still confused. Will, I'll go to you.
He don't know.
I think that it sounds as if the questions have to do with what does the punisher need to do in order to get compensated is what I think the question is. I think it's irrelevant, and I think that that's why the objections may have been sustained, but I'm guessing.
Serena?
I think it's going towards the prosecution's ability to argue that Diddy controlled everything, and that if people didn't do exactly what he wanted Diddy to do, then they would have suffered consequences. Again, the question of, if you didn't perform this way, would it affect your pay, goes to Diddy's control over his compensation. That if he didn't act the way that Diddy wanted him to act, that he wasn't going to get paid, he was going to lose his job, and maybe worse. So I think that that's what they're trying to establish.
Got a question from Philly PA Girl. Does anyone know how many women are on the jury? 4 women, 8 men. That's our count. Okay, got a question here from Abry Strauss. I'll throw it to you, Serena. If the prosecution offered Cassie a deal to turn evidence against Diddy or face charges for complicity, would the public be told?
Well, I think that the public would find that out just based on the cross-examination. I mean, if that's what ended up happening and it was disclosed because it needs to be disclosed, then as a defense attorney, I would be questioning her about that. It makes you what's called an interested witness. It gives you a reason to testify a certain way, to testify for the prosecution in their favor. So I think we would probably have heard about the conditions, or at least some of the conditions of that, had she been cooperating. But I think it's a great question, because I also think the prosecution needed to make a decision and decide, is Cassie a victim or a co-conspirator?
Going back to a poll that we put up on YouTube, do you think Diddy's family's presence?
That's a great question. Is she a victim or is she a co-conspirator? A lot of people just focused on like, yo, she the victim. What? Did she have something to do with this too? Was she, cool with it? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
Is Cassie a victim or a co-conspirator?
Going back to a poll that we put up on YouTube, do you think Diddy's family's presence in court provides him a sense of confidence? Will, 65% say yes, 34% say no. So having a victim's family there, taking this poll stats, it does have an effect on the defendant, right?
Oh, sure. I mean, usually whoever's in the audience has an effect on the defendant. If a defendant's entire family is there, that certainly helps. That certainly provides some sense of confidence. If the defendant's family is missing from a trial, it makes a person feel alone. Similarly, if a victim's entire family is there, that provides them with some confidence. And again, if none of the victim's family is there, they also feel alone. So I think it's those, psychological components of a trial that have nothing to do with evidence, but really have to do with how individuals in the courtroom feel during the course of a trial. I mean, trials are difficult for everyone involved, for the defendants, for the witnesses, for the jurors. There's a whole psychological game that goes on that has nothing to do with what's happening on the witness stand.
I got a question from Chris Bono. I'll go to you, Will. Could too many expert witnesses be called that will backfire for the prosecution? That is too much for the jury to want to follow. Interesting question.
I think the answer is yes. I think, as Serena said before, the prosecution really needs to streamline their case, and you can have expert witnesses testify about just about anything and just about everything. And at the end of the day, at some point, a jury tunes that out. So to hit the high points with the expert witnesses, I agree. They're going to need to bring in somebody to testify as to the delayed disclosure. They may bring in someone to testify as to, what used to be called battered women's syndrome, to talk about why Cassie stayed in this very abusive relationship. But other than that, I think that they need to move on. I think it'd be a mistake to call too many expert witnesses. It always is.
I got one more question for you, Serena. It's about an update from court. So the prosecutor asks Mr. Hayes, what did you think would happen next? Hayes responds, I was worried I would not be used again. I hadn't done my job. He has said, I want to see you basically having sex with Cassie, and I couldn't. He was asked, are you writing a book? Hayes responds, yes, a self-help book about my ED. It's advice. In your book, do you write about your time with Mr. Combs and Miss Ventura? Yes, I call them a married, wealthy couple.
Wow.
How long is it? 6 pages out of 186. I sensationalize it. I wanted it to be enjoyable, highs and lows. What's that about, Serena?
He wrote a book.
Prior inconsistent statements. There's always a risk if you say anything about a case that you will eventually be testifying in, and that's somehow documented, whether it's in a deposition, in a book, online. It will be saved and it will be used against you during your testimony at trial if it cuts against what your testimony is all about. And so I think, possibly the questioning has to be about, well, you didn't say this or you did say that, and today you're saying it this way, but in your book you said it that way.
Right.
And now he's left trying to defend his words in his book, either to say, look, they were true, but this is also true, or as you mentioned, Jesse, that he kind of exaggerated certain things in order to make it an enjoyable book, and it's a work of fiction.
Serena Townsend, William Corman, thank you so much for taking the time, coming on here, breaking down the real updates, breaking down the questions from our viewers. Always appreciate you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jesse.
Okay, so that was P. Diddy Stripper describes intimate details of freak-offs. Come on, bro. Buddy name was The Punisher, bro. That's all we gotta say. Buddy name was The Punisher. He was coming in there for one thing and one thing only: to punish. And this stuff is wild. First thing we start off with is baby oil, obviously, right? But this whole thing with this case, they're actually bringing the workers in that was actually involved with these things. This stuff is crazy. The whole urinating on her thing, but then they said she actually asked for it. I don't know, man. Y'all let me know in the comments. You made it this far, you a real one for real. Like I said, I'm gonna try to stay up to date to the best of my ability, but it's a lot going on. But till next time, self-love and positivity. Fire Squad, I got you and you know it. Whew.